$1.9 trillion, 100 million doses, Biden's 50th day in office, and all any of us can talk about is a British prince. Welcome to the Huddle. Welcome back to the Huddle. I'm Brendan Kownacki. Thanks for joining us here on another edition for some Inner Circle analysis. As always, we're joined by Marc Ross, strategist, commentator, sports aficionado. Marc, I always love seeing the jerseys hanging behind you, a tribute to the sports that keep us all bonded together. But not enough time for that. We have to dive right in. It is the 50th day of the Biden administration. This is half of the famous 100-day marker. And while the president has managed to accrue a few more of his inner circle advisors in the cabinet, Marcia Fudge approved as the Housing and Urban Development Secretary, Merrick Garland confirmed as the Attorney General. He did lose two close advisors this week, Major and Champ. Sad. Marc, what do you think about what's going on these days in Washington?
Well, there are a lot of numbers being thrown around. I'm going to throw another number out to you. It's almost like the 12 days of Christmas. In fact, the American Rescue Plan possibly going down is certainly the biggest win for the Biden administration. I know we're only 50 days in, but this could be the biggest win ever for his presidency. This bill not only is directing lots of funds for COVID relief, but it is a progressive's wish list. In fact, it is Christmas and Hanukkah wrapped up into one. This is easily one of the largest pieces of legislation since the LBJ administration. That's going to have massive impact, not only on the stimulation of the economy, but I think there is a wish list of progressive priorities that we haven't ever seen. And it just shows you how important it is that those two Senate races in Georgia went to the Democrats. I mean, this is a real power play move. It looks like the House has just passed this piece of legislation. The White House is saying they expect to sign this bill on Friday. But as Joe Biden said back in the day, this is a BFD, a big freaking deal.
I know we're going to dive into some of the numbers in that COVID relief package, but before we get there, I do want to talk about what's happening physically in the nation's capital in order to get that bill across the finish line. The National Guard has extended their deployment. We talked weeks ago, going up to the inauguration, about the fences that were circling the actual Capitol building. Now we still see those troops marching through the DC area. It's a famous story, of course, about the Quartering Act in the Revolution, about not having soldiers dropped into your city and then asked to be taken care of. That's what's happening here in the nation's capital. Why is it that the Capitol Police, DC Metro, why are they unable to just protect their own jurisdiction?
Well, it's not even actually today. I was in the district. I had to run an errand, and I was at 17th and Constitution by the ellipse there. And there was a fence there. I mean, there is a perimeter around the White House that now extends to 2 or 3 blocks as well, security fencing. I don't know what's really going on. I have to think, this is only pure speculation. I have no idea where the National Guard is still in Capitol Hill. I'm guessing they're adding other fortifications, other security measures that haven't been in place before. Maybe they need a new time, but certainly, seeing fencing, like proper 8 to 10 foot fencing around the White House, around the Capitol, is something we've never seen in my 20 plus years of being here in the nation's capital. And it's not a good sign. I mean, obviously the Congress doesn't really have to tell us why they're doing it, but there has to be some other additional reason. I'm speculating that they're adding other security. I don't know. What's your sense?
There have been reported anonymous militia threats from far-right groups. Those are not being very clearly defined as far as the reason for the continued fencing, for the continued troop presence. Obviously, nobody wants to relive the horror of January 6th. We don't want to see anything worse happen. There's been speculation about possible threats against some of these other legislative votes of the future State of the Union, things like that. But at the same time, military officials, I'm hearing from some of my sources are telling me they're not thrilled with the idea that this The National Guard is supposed to be a support infrastructure, but it's also not a permanent one. And so when they came in, they did their job, and then they're supposed to depart. So I think the question for me is, what does it really say about the city they've come to protect? Because DC was making such big charges for statehood, I think the one thing it's showing, it's not ready.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a proponent of statehood. It doesn't make any sense. The U.S. government needs to have its own special territory. You know, we can go down the whole list of why that's a reason, but I don't know. I still trust our government. I feel like they probably have a reason for them to be there. It's not a good look. The cherry blossoms are coming, so maybe when the cherry blossoms fall, the wall will come down too.
We can hope so. But now let's go inside the razor wire and let's look more at the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. This has been bouncing around the congressional chambers for the last couple of days, and we have seen all kinds of provisions, not all of them related to COVID. And at $1.9 trillion, this is a behemoth. Tell me, by the numbers, what are we looking at?
I mean, to give you a perspective, this is like 10% of our economy, right? This bill is bigger than the entire economy of Russia, right? So this is a massive piece of legislation. In fact, it is the sixth piece of legislation that's been wrapped around kind of coronavirus relief, which is also pretty interesting. But I think what's really key here are these progressive liberal wish lists pieces of legislation. You know, and the Democrat Party has changed their approach to legislation for a long time. You know, they want to be bipartisan. They want to get Republicans on board. This is a strictly party line vote. This is a strictly, you know, let's move it through. We won the election. We're getting the job done. I mean, I think this is a really big statement for the Democrat Party. Some of these other numbers, I mean, to give you, I'm going to go to the list here, but more than 1 million unionized workers will now have their pensions protected for 100% for 30 years, which is amazing. America's indigenous communities will receive $31 billion. This is the largest contribution ever to America's Native people. And a large majority of Americans who earn less than $75,000 a year will receive stimulus checks. We've got child care issues in here. We've got protection of health care. I don't know. I mean, it is a fundamentally big bill. And in some ways, too, this is a bet, right? If you're thinking about it politically, this is a bet that this is going to be the stimulus that's going to jumpstart the economy. And it could put the Republicans, in fact, who all voted against this bill, in a very tough position when we face the election just 2 years, not less than a year, 12, 14 months away now. It could cost them millions of dollars to explain to voters why they voted for what could turn out to be a really powerful piece of legislation. The takeaway here is the Democrats are being Republicans, frankly. They're like, we got the votes, we control the Senate, we control the House, we control the presidency, and damn it, we're passing this bill. So hats off to them. Raw politics at its best.
On the flip side of the coin here, though, as pointed out by Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee, only about 9% of the funding in this bill actually relates to COVID-related programs. I do agree with you. Republicans could end up facing questions about why they voted against it, but they're going to probably take this large chunk of money, the other 91% of dollars in that bill, and they're going to tell their constituents, look at what the Democrats were doing while you were looking for relief during this economic meltdown. Look at what our opponents were doing when you needed $1,400. And so that $1,400 number is also an interesting one, because at $1.9 trillion, it's not exactly where you should divide that up among the people in the country. But if you divide that up among the 330 million people roughly in the United States, everyone should be getting about $5,500. So for those wanting their direct COVID relief, they should be wondering, where's the other $4,000 they're owed? I think this debate is definitely going to be one that has ramifications. Only about a quarter of the spending in this bill is reported to be able to hit the mark by the end of this year. So most of this money actually is not even having anything to do with 2021. This is a years-long gamble.
No, 100%. And I want to say hats off to you for reading the Republican talking points, because that is the case. I mean, this is a situation. The Democrats are saying we control all branches of government. We're passing this piece of legislation. We've got priorities. We've got people of color. we have African-American farmers, we have union workers, we have child care issues, and we're going to pass this bill. And hats off to them. And hats off to the Republicans, because as we enter this age of hyper politics where the majorities are so small, as we know, 50-50 in the Senate, anything is going to happen. Both parties have kind of staked their claim. I got to give it to the Democrats. For a long time, they never seemed that interested in actually winning. They've always been interested in good governing. So as somebody who likes the raw power of politics, I commend them.
Gun power. We remember Newt Gingrich and the Republican agenda of the 1990s, and that when the power falls in your lap, don't waste it, because that's maybe the only bigger sin than overspending or overtaxing or over anything, is wasting the opportunity to do something when you have the chance.
I mean, this is like a Rahm Emanuel special in so many ways. And also, hats off to Joe Manchin, the President 1B, playing very deftly, maximizing his resources, playing both sides, getting great stuff for West Virginia. I don't know. It's a great age of hyper politics, raw power. And speaking of raw power, should we pivot to the West Coast and Santa Barbara?
You and I talked about whether or not we should even bring this up on this show, because as much as Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have nothing to do with American politics, they represent everything about our diplomatic relationships, the issues with race and class, and of course, the media obsession with things that aren't necessarily the most important. Mark, this was a bombshell interview. And if I didn't think it before 100%, Oprah Winfrey is Hall of Fame when it comes to asking the right questions.
Oprah Winfrey, professional. Also nice to have neighbors in Santa Barbara to give up their backyard. The numbers are massive, 17 million. I mean, this is like a sporting level number. The reverberations across the Commonwealth, across the United Kingdom, across the pond have been amazing. We have Piers Morgan gone. We have Justin Trudeau being asked about this. The Biden White House has been asked about this. I don't know, bombshell. But my big thing is, now that Meghan and Harry have shot off this bazooka and pulled the pin, what's next? I mean, you're taking on an institution that's 1,200 years old. I don't think sitting in the backyard with even the most powerful Hall of Fame interviewer is going to make a dent in the long term, but certainly in the short term, a lot of theatrics, a lot of excitement.
I don't know that Prince Harry wanted to dismantle the monarchy. I'm not sure if his wife really did, whether or not that's what Piers Morgan accuses her of. But at the same time, they've alluded that they just wanted to speak their truth. That's certainly what happened in this interview. There was conversations about race and mental health and privacy, and just wanting, at the end of the day, the prince, whether he's nobility or not, said he's just a father and a husband trying to protect his family. I think this was an interesting interview, perhaps ill-timed, given that a lot of people are still struggling in other ways. So to see a Montecito backyard is maybe not the most relatable moment in our lives at the moment. But this was a distraction. Like you said, Oprah Winfrey managed to take this and make it Super Bowl level. It had 17 million viewers. A report came out saying that she had specifically wanted to make this a one-night broadcast TV event so that people weren't searching for it on streaming, thinking they'd watch it later. There was strategy behind every level of this. The question is, how do you fade back into a little bit of obscurity, get a little bit of the privacy that you're after when you've sparked the biggest conversation in the civilized world?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Queen Elizabeth, also a Hall of Famer. I mean, this woman is, I would have to go through maybe 10 or 15 different presidents, took over the throne when she was 26. She's the head of state of, I don't know, we can go through the list, 17 or 18 countries. You got Prince Charles, who's obviously dying to be king. He's at 70 years old. The monarchy is going through a transition. There's William, they skip Charles. I think what's interesting about the head of state stuff, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, pretty serious countries in their own right. The Queen is still the head of state. Is that proper for Australia to still have a monarch as the head of state? these are issues that are going to reverberate. And you can see, as you check a reform and think about a monarchy family, where does it go from here? It's easy to get attention and kind of pull the pin, right? But to keep it going, to win, takes ongoing communications and advocacy, right? And I don't see what's the next step? Like, where do we go from here? I don't know what the end game is for Harry and Meghan, other than hanging out with famous people in Santa Barbara, Montecito, California. But I don't know. Maybe I'm being too Piers Morgan about it.
With the $100 million Netflix deal that the prince and his wife have signed, you have to wonder whether now a lot of these issues are going to shake out in the content which they choose to produce. And so obviously when you have a institution like Oprah Winfrey on your side, certainly I think they'll be apt to try and explore some of the mental health topics. Obviously, the prince has always been a big advocate for veterans. And now when you're going to look at possibly race, let's not forget that another close ally of Prince Harry is Barack Obama, former president of the United States, and another Netflix employee. And so we have to think that maybe he's going to turn all this attention into good. The royal family released their statement responding to the interview, saying that these issues will be handled privately, but that they acknowledge the content that was said in the interview. They don't outright deny anything.
Yeah, I'm with all that, but to me, there was none of that. If I had an opportunity to command 2 hours of Oprah Winfrey's time and have a global messaging campaign, would I have talked about how difficult it was to try to change and be a part of an institution that's 1,200 years old? It's such a crazy old institution. Why not spend an hour saying, here's the problems, and then say, here's where we're going to go forward? Before you ask me the next question, a piece of masterwork as well. I mean, there's so many talented people in this situation. Oprah, Harry and Meghan are super talented. The Buckingham Palace team, the statement the Queen put out is masterwork. I mean, it is like this line here, while some recollections may vary, power. I mean, that whole thing, that statement alone is just masterwork. Anyways, it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. I'm excited. We're going to keep talking about it. I'm excited for The Crown season 10. It's also interesting, Netflix, The Crown, Obama. If you were doing a, map of this, you couldn't make this up. This is like a CIA level craziness. Anyways.
Oh, this is one of these. This is like Carrie in Homeland. You want all the pictures on the wall with the yarn everywhere. But you're more the Anglophile than me, so I have to say, why is it that the British royal family has managed to outlast so many other monarchies? Where you have royal families in Spain, Sweden, Monaco, and while those institutions do exist still, a lot of those people are the wealthiest families, but they're not the influence and power that the British royals are. How is it that this family has managed to stay on top?
I think it really has to do with two things: English language, access to America. It's interesting, as a country who, we just supposedly despise, as a country in America, we supposedly despise monarchy. Some of the biggest cultural shows that we love, The Crown, Downton Abbey, anytime someone with a British accent speaks anywhere in North America, we automatically think they're 10 times smarter. I don't know. I think it's access to North America also. And I think it's just commitment. I mean, stability, not being flashy. Queen Elizabeth is set in her ways, and you need that stability. I think the whole thing about The Crown and the opening season about that is just like, the Crown must always win. And it's almost in some ways like the U.S. government always must win. That's why you've got barricades around the Capitol. Certain institutions have to exist forever. And the use of the royal family is also kind of crazy, because I think a better term is it's called the firm, right? And it's an institution. It's a lot like the Catholic Church, right? I mean, there's certain institutions, the Chinese Communist Party, that they're going to survive. They got to do what they got to do. And it might not always be pleasant, but it's not a family in the sense of like my family or your family, right? I mean, it's the head of state for 10 or 15 different countries. I mean, that alone, in the Commonwealth situation, I don't know. It's not a normal, hey, let's get around the barbecue and eat some shrimp on the Barbie kind of family.
One of the aspects of the interview, which I found interesting, was you had a little bit of Meghan Markle asking why about certain traditions. And like you said, there's no question why. It's just how it is.
Right.
And speaking of barbecues, I think once we see Prince Harry's 4th of July plans, that's really where we're going to have a good sense about his relationship between the U.S. and the UK. Well, Mark, as you know, we don't have a guest this week. We're gearing up for a special episode next week to track 1 year of the coronavirus pandemic. We are going to talk to a really special medical expert who's going to give us some background and insight into just how far we've come, talking about the fears that, of course, we all felt 12 months ago. And now 1 year later, the hope that we see just in the near distance. So one more thing before we go. Mark, who do you want in your huddle this week?
So I'm going to go with Senate Majority Leader Charles E. Schumer of the great state of New York, the Empire State. He shepherded through a messy but major win for Team Biden. I can't stress enough how important this American Rescue Plan is for not only for America, you can quibble about the numbers, but as a sign of strength for the progressive liberal movement. It's a real hats off. It's a big bet. He rolled the dice. It's going to be interesting how he plays out, but you got to love having Schumer in your huddle, especially if you are Joe Biden. How about you? Who do you want in your huddle?
Well, Mark, I was thinking about how this past week, the founder of Twitter, he sold the first tweet. Now, do you think that Chuck Schumer is going to try and get an autographed copy of his 1,100-page COVID relief bill and keep that somewhere in a museum?
100%, man. It's all about NFTs. So, when members of Congress start putting digital assets for sale, we've gone full circle. I'm ready for it.
Well, this week in my huddle, I definitely have been continuing on the British trend we were just talking about. This week, I'm choosing the artist Banksy. Now, Banksy, of course, is an artist and an underworld scoundrel for some people. He released a video this past week of a painting he did on the side of a British prison, narrated using clips from an old episode of Bob Ross. We all love Bob Ross's painting. And, Banksy, though, is as much of a provocateur of politics as he is of art. He has always used his imagery as a way of raising themes in the political conversation, drawing things about war, poverty, and, of course, classism and the rich. So Banksy is one guy I'd always want on my side versus the other.
Absolutely love it. Banksy is a true hero. What a doer, what a maverick, what a maker. Painting a prison. Love it.
He's kind of like Robin Hood with a spray can, if you think about it.
And if you want to get more Banksy, there's going to be a private showing, a private collection, art, if we ever get out of this COVID nonsense. We're going to go to London Town Covent Garden in May. There's going to be an art show with the Banksy, some of his art in his private collection. It's going to be fun. And Bob Ross, you can't go wrong. So we got Bob Ross, Charles Schumer, and Banksy. That's a hell of a huddle.
What a thing. Well, Mark, we'll see you next week, and we will be talking about COVID-19. We look forward to having everyone join us and taking part in that conversation to see just how we're all faring as we keep on through this pandemic. See you next week.